All right, let's talk. We don't often talk odds, gambling odds on the draft show. We certainly do it on Pick Six all the time. But let's talk some draft odds because we're getting into the part of the conversation where, over under and how many skill position players go at this number or that number. Quarterbacks will certainly be in the conversation. But let's talk specifically about who goes first overall. And no surprise, Aiden Hutchinson is at plus 160, followed by Kayvon Thibodeau at plus 200. And those guys have gone back and forth pretty much throughout the fall. And now that we get into the new year here, Evan Neal has routinely been a favorite at the top of the draft. And I think some folks have him going number one, even as recently as the last month or so. And I get that because Jacksonville has the first overall pick, and Jacksonville doesn't need edge rushers. They need offensive linemen, specifically tackles. But I want to get to our guy, Ike Ekwonu, who Evan Neal's plus 250, if I didn't mention that. Ike Ekwonu is now plus 500. And I think, what'd you say, Debo? He was 30-1 a few weeks ago?
He was right? 80-1.
80-1.
Just about 2 weeks ago.
So, I mean, that's bonkers. Clearly, NC State hasn't played a football game in 2 months. So, Vegas is sort of figuring out that the draft folks are on Ike Ekwonu, and that will affect the folks who end up, betting their hard-earned money on that. Traps, I'll start with you. Is there a chance Ike Ekwonu is the first overall pick? And how do you like these 5-1 odds? Certainly you would like 80-1 odds, but here we are.
I think he has a chance. He'll have to test really well at the combine. I mean, we all saw the Evan Neal box jump during the season, and he's 6'7", 360, apparently, like close to that Mekhi Becton size. Ekwonu is not going to measure in or weigh in as impressively as Evan Neal. But if he has a Tristan Wurtz-esque workout, which I don't think is out of the realm of possibility in terms of, a 40-yard dash that's really good, 3-cone drill, vertical, and just proves himself as this kind of compact but high-end athlete, I think that is where the really good value is because it's an offensive tackle. The Jaguars need that. Whoever's calling the shots there in April for the Jaguars, I think have to kind of gravitate toward offensive tackle. That if it's your first draft as a head coach and you're picking another edge rusher after witnessing what happened to Trevor Lawrence, how often he got hit and how disappointing his rookie season is, you're kind of getting off to the wrong foot as a new head coach. So I think that's why Evan Neal has pretty good odds, and that's why we've probably seen Ekwonu, your guy, Ryan, that you talked about way before anyone else. This is like your Mac Jones 2.0, that you were telling people Mac Jones was going to be a first-round pick. Like, I was listening to this podcast last year. I'm like, Mac Jones is not going to go in the first round, and he ultimately does. So I think maybe Vegas started to listen to the Pick Six podcast and said, hey, Ryan Wilson was on Mac Jones early. He's on this random NC State offensive tackle, so let's move these odds up from 80-1 down to where they are today.
Yeah, let's hope that's not what Vegas is doing in order to. But you mentioned
that's my theory. That's my theory.
Okay, you mentioned Tristan Wurtz, and that's actually it brings me back to this. Tristan Wurtz was the fourth tackle taken in that draft class in 2020 after Andrew Thomas, Jedrick Wills, Mekhi Becton. You mentioned Mekhi Becton just a moment ago. Mekhi Becton has struggled with injuries. I think when he's healthy, he's pretty good, Josh, but he hasn't been able to stay on the field. But I think you would argue if you're doing a redraft, and Jedrick Wills better than the rest of us because he plays for the Browns. He's also had some injury issues this year, and I like him a lot. But I feel like Tristan Wurtz is probably the first tackle off the board, not just because he's athletic. He's a really good football player. But in terms of Icky, how do you feel about him as potentially being tackle one, and then the chances that he ends up going first overall to the Jags?
Yeah, I think it's certainly a possibility that he could be the first offensive lineman taken, tackle if you want to be more specific. I've said that I just don't see a number one overall prospect in this class, which kind of means that it's more up in the air than typical years. Jacksonville has a couple of edge rushers that they've invested in over the past 5 years. So maybe they do want to go to the offensive side of the ball, specifically to protect Trevor Lawrence. I mean, that's got to be the most crucial objective for this organization this offseason. Obviously, Trent Baalke, the general manager, is returning. They will have a new head coach, so maybe that'll give us some kind of a indication into what their thinking is once they make that decision. But I could absolutely see, 5 different players being the number one overall pick in this draft class, because I don't think anybody has asserted themselves as that top overall recruit. So, is Ekwonu the top tackle in this class? I think he's certainly worthy of the conversation, just as Mississippi State's Charles Cross or Alabama's Evan Neal. I don't think he fits in, quite as well as that lauded class that you just mentioned. I think he would have been, a little bit down the board, but still a fantastic player and a guy that deserves this early consideration.
Any concern at all? I'll ask you, Josh, and then Traps, you can certainly follow, that it sounds like Byron Leftwich is going to be the new coach in Jacksonville. That's great news, I think. But any concern at all that they don't have a head coach? Trent Baalke's hiring. I'm assuming he's having a lot to do with the hiring situation, hiring the head coach, the offensive coordinator, and then they'll fill in the gaps. I mean, does that make that job any less attractive if you're a candidate looking for that job?
Yeah, absolutely. Because it looks like he's been, working behind the scenes to gain this power struggle, within the organization. And it's nothing new. I mean, it's happened in San Francisco and other places in the past. So there has to be a little bit of concern that, maybe if you decide to take that job, your general manager is not necessarily working with you, but, trying to protect his own head at the end of the day.
Yeah, I certainly feel the same. I mean, Trent Baalke had a nice start to his career as a GM in San Francisco. Some of those picks were Scott McLuhan's picks, I believe, before that, in the Jim Harbaugh, Alex Smith, Colin Kaepernick era. I will say, though, one of the Trent Baalke's early drafts in San Francisco, they picked Anthony Davis, who was not 6'7", 360 and this freaky specimen. Ooh. He was kind of a more compact, athletic type that is a little bit more like Ekwonu. And then if Byron Leftwich is there, I mean, he's had, firsthand experience with Tristan Wurtz. That could be part of the reason why these odds have really improved for the NC State blocker, because of the history of Trent Baalke, and that we've kind of heard over the last couple of days that it seems like Byron Leftwich is going to be the next coach.
So, Traps, if you have $100 and I don't see the odds in front of you, but Aiden Hutchinson plus 160, Kayvon Thibodeau plus 200, Evan Neal plus 250, Icky plus 500. Who are you putting your $100 down on? To go first overall. We've been talking about Ekwonu, but I still would probably think the best value is Evan Neal, because I think the Alabama pedigree, although I will say his film in 2021 was not as good as it was in 2020. Like, he had an opportunity to lock himself in, especially now with the Jaguars at number one, to be like the locked in number one pick. They need an offensive tackle. He's at Alabama. He's long. His film is not that great. It's not, like Josh said, someone that you feel really great about being a number one overall prospect. But I still think, because he is from Alabama, he's long. The athleticism is probably going to be there. He's going to test really well for his size. And because the Jaguars need a tackle, I think that's the best value, because he's the third best odds at plus 250. I would still go Evan Neal with $100. What do you think, Josh?
So I'm going to put 50 on Kayvon Thibodeau, and I'm going to put 50 on the field. Because, you want to double dip a little bit, maybe get that long shot, whether it's, Mississippi State's Charles Cross. I don't think they would take a cornerback, because they did invest in Shaq Griffin, and then they picked
first overall.
Campbell. Yeah, I don't think they would because of that. But
wow, I didn't know that was even in the conversation. Are you just saying that will? That's like.
No, I don't think it's in the conversation.
Okay.
I think he's got that type of talent that maybe would warrant that consideration for another team. I just think there's better options for Jacksonville specifically. So, if there was a team that needed a cornerback at top of the draft class, I think Stingley would absolutely be in that conversation.
Okay, 10-second answer. Start with you, Josh. Patrick Surtain or Derek Stingley? You have the fifth pick. Who are you taking?
I'm taking Surtain.
Me too. I'm with you.
Because he has been the most consistent. Stingley just, has been injured or inconsistent the last couple of years.
What about you, Traps?
I'll pick Stingley. I think Stingley gives you more athleticism, more twitch. I think Patrick Surtain in a straight line is more impressive. They're both similarly sized or bigger outside corners. And when he's healthy at his peak, I think Stingley plays the football better in the air. That Patrick Surtain, I remember having a lot of those plays over the top where he kind of looked confused when the ball was in the air. So they're both high-end prospects. You're still getting a top starter at the cornerback spot, but I would lean a little bit toward Derek Stingley.
All right, fair enough. I mean, we don't. At the end of the day, the dirty little secret is we don't know what we're talking about. I mean, if you go back to that 2019 Alabama LSU tape where Jamar Chase is just absolutely abusing Trevon Diggs. Trevon Diggs had 400 interceptions this year. I know he struggled at times on the other stuff. But you just don't know. You have no idea. You can only go on what you've seen based on what you've seen prior to that and try to project how these kids are going to be. But who am I to say whether Stingley or Surtain is going to be better? I didn't love Surtain coming out.
I didn't love him either. I
think I had him behind JC Horn and Caleb Farley, but he had a pretty good rookie season. So again, you don't really know. And by the way, when you look like that, you're probably going to be pretty good at something.